Crossed. Family Values is the chronological sequel to the first comic. We already have a video on that, so if you haven't checked it out already, the link is in the description. If you know anything about the Crossed stories, you'd know that Garth Ennis has abundantly explored sensitive subjects, including, but not limited to, incest, gore, graphic stuff, and abuse. The first comic was written by Garth Ennis, but all future issues in this series have been worked on by different writers. Will this be a good thing or a bad thing? Well, that is for you to decide. Let us jump right into this obnoxiously wild story. Crossed Family Values. Chapter 1. Cheap Soul. Let's go over the basics first. The C virus is spreading all over the world, and anyone that comes into contact with it is turned into the Crossed. They are called the Crossed because they have distinct rashes on their faces in the shape of a cross. The Crossed are super intelligent zombies that can think and act just like humans, but have their morality code turned off. In fact, it is as though the infection makes them carry out their most insane desires, and thus the Crossed are limited by nothing. They murder, dismember, assault, pillage, extort, exploit. In fact, anything is up for grabs, and you can start to see where all the problems begin. Most good people won't be able to survive this world, and the ones that do aren't going to be really that different from the Crossed. And so each Crossed comic in the chronological order explores what is happening around the world in different countries and in different settings. This time we are following the Pratt family made up of 13 members. The story is being told from the perspective of their oldest daughter, Adeline. Although the Pratt family seems happy on the surface, things are quite different when you get to know them. The first page gives us a glimpse into what the secret might actually be. A happy home ornament is hung outside the Pratt family home, but it is covered in blood. Adeline begins by telling us how she had survived all this while, thanks to her dad. But her dad isn't the saint everyone believes him to be. He kept Adeline and the others motivated by telling them that how they conduct themselves will determine where you spend eternity. This tells us that Adeline's father is quite religious, but Adeline, on the other hand, has different values. After all, she has done, and after everything that she has been through, she doesn't know what to believe in anymore. And the only thing keeping Adeline going right now is the fact that she wants to see her dad burn in hell. Adeline then tells us about the past, how the family used to own a ranch, specifically a horse ranch. The ranch was quite huge, and the family mainly bred quarter horses. The ranch is surrounded by forest on all sides, and the nearby hills make for a stunning backdrop. Adeline loves to ride horses, and today is no different. Once she is done, she heads to the ranch saddler, Max. Adeline's saddle needs to be fixed, and Max tells her that he can do it, but advises her to stay off of the horse. Max has seen too many men lose their lives to horses. Adeline plays along because she is here for something else. She has an ulterior motive, and while Max is distracted, Adeline pockets one of his tools. She quickly hides it in her hat and then leaves the shop. She then goes on to introduce us to her family. The Pratt family had 10 children, 5 girls and 5 boys. Adeline had just turned 18. She was the oldest girl among them, and the third oldest kid overall. She had 2 older brothers, Joseph and Matthew. Joseph was 21 years old, while Matthew was 19. The youngest among them was their baby brother Eli, who was usually looked after by Kayleen. She also had a sister Hannah, who was 16 years old, and 2 younger brothers, John and Paul, that were inseparable. Adeline had recently lost their grandmother, and the only extended family that remained was their uncle, Eli. To quote Adeline, Uncle Eli was a nutter. Adeline then tells us that her father was a Christian, and his name was Joseph. Everybody respected and feared him, but we see that Adeline had a different equation with him. She remembers that her father had built the ranch from nothing, and she had never seen a man stronger than him, whether it be in body or will. She remembers that everybody around them was in denial about Dad, or rather scared to death of him. The next panel shows us what Adeline is talking about. Her father and Emily, her sister, are approaching the family from a dark corner of the ranch. Joseph is zipping up his pants without any shame, while Adeline is being pestered by her mother. Adeline's tired of her mother being undeniable about Dad. Her mother either goes back to work or begins pestering other people so that they don't spot or pay attention to what Joseph is doing. But this time, things are different. Now that Adeline has turned 18, she plans to take matters into her own hands. Adeline tells another to go look after Emily while she requests a talk with her dad. Her father reluctantly agrees and walks to the kitchen for a private talk with Adeline and fails to spot the sharp tool she is hiding in her hat. I want you to stop doing what you're doing to Emily. If you have something to say, speak plainly. I want you to stop abusing Emily. Oh, and before I continue, continue, just a small request. If you have liked the video thus far, please consider subscribing to us. It may be a small click for you, but it helps us in tremendous ways to keep bringing you these marvelous long reads. And now, let's continue. That's it. Without even a second thought, Joseph punches his daughter directly in the face. Joseph hits her so hard that he breaks her nose. A stream of blood flies through the air as Adeline falls to the ground with a bleeding nose. The tool she had managed to get from Max's shop also flies out of her hand. She groans in pain as her father towers over her with a menacing look on his face. He tells her that this isn't the way. This isn't how their family operates. Women do not talk back to me, especially their fathers. Adeline is still on the ground, crawling towards the tool that flew out of her hand. Her father removes his belt, pulls Adeline's pants down, and begins beating her mercilessly. And when her mother walks in, Joseph simply screams at her to get out, with tears in her eyes and blood flowing from her nose. Adeline watches her mother simply walk away without any care for her. The brutal assault only stops when Joseph hears screams of his fellow men from outside. Pull yourself together. We'll not speak of this again. When Joseph walks outside, the ranch is in utter chaos. All the horses have been spooked and are running in all directions. The men are doing their best, but there are simply too many horses to handle. Adeline is back in her room and her fear has turned into rage. The adrenaline that now flows through her veins has prompted her to grab her gun. Adeline is cursing herself for being weak. She hides by a window aiming for her dad when suddenly she hears that voice, a voice that will change the future and haunt all her days. She remembers at first that it sounded like a pack of coyotes running after a kill, but strangely, it wasn't as alien as coyotes usually are. It was strangely human. On the ground, even if father is flabbergasted by the voice, what could be making this sound? And that is when they come into view in the tree line, chasing after an escaped horse. The crossed are here. Joseph quickly turns around to his men and orders them to get their rifles. He then orders his family to get inside, while one of them begrudgingly takes a look at the tree line. What he sees sends shivers down his spine. Hundreds of crossed are approaching the ranch. Men, women, children, all covered in blood, with distinct cross rashes across their faces. Most of them carry weapons, especially the children, and most women are half naked. You can guess why. The next page is dedicated to a single panel and gives a perspective into the mess the Pratt family is in. Hundreds, if not thousands of the crossed are running towards the ranch. The ground is covered in red wherever they've managed to kill one of the horses, and as they approach the ranch, they begin to run faster and faster. Everybody in the ranch is heading towards the main building, but the stark darkness of the night isn't making things easier for them. The battle has begun, and all the men from the ranch are busy firing at the crossed to help keep them at bay. Joseph orders Eli to go and help the women and children to get into the trucks so that they can escape easily. The fire of hundreds of shots of most of them meeting their mark, and yet the crossed keep coming. They get shot in their legs, arms and chest, but that doesn't seem to matter to them. They simply keep running towards the ranch with a wicked smile on their face. The men firing from the roof of the building quickly notice that they are going to be outnumbered soon, and the same thought crosses Matthew's mind on the ground. His father tells him to focus on their family and to keep on shooting. Minutes later, Joseph and the men on the ground are surrounded by the crossed. By now, they have learned to shoot them in the head, but they're getting too close for comfort. The men have formed a circle to keep them at bay, but they are getting picked off one by one. Hundreds of bodies are littered at their feet when Joseph orders them to fall back to the road. He doesn't want his family getting cut off by the crossed. Back outside the family home, Uncle Eli is shooting every other crossed that comes near them while helping the family get in the trucks. We then see Adeline, who is already strapped to the brim, decides to go and help the men. Her mother tries to stop her, but the next second they are soon interrupted by an ambulance speeding towards them. Adeline barely has time to move out of the way when the ambulance crashes into the truck nearby. In the wreckage is the dismembered body of the crossed that was driving the truck. His body has been split in half, his skull is fractured, and his arm is hanging by tendons, and still he is simply smiling, the same wicked, menacing smile that everyone has, even in his death. Back on the road, the last standing man apart from Joseph and his two children is picked off by the crossed. This is when Joseph speaks speaks up. "This is the devil's hand. Look at their faces. This is pestilence." The man that the cross recently picked off has turned. He is peeing on the other cross when he decides to attack Joseph. The turned man brings up Joseph, sexually assaulting his daughter. But before the cross can say more, Joseph shoots him directly in the head. Near the family home, the women and children have also armed themselves when suddenly Adeline watches Emily get chased by a chainsaw wielding cross. She screams for her sister as she watches her run into Max's shop, but by the time she reaches inside, it's already too late. Max and Emily have both turned, and the scene is too graphic to describe. Max's secret desires are now on the surface. He wants to use Adeline for his pleasure, and without her consent, which is why he lunges at her. Adeline shoots Max directly in the chest and then towards her sister. The crossed are known to use anything and everything against you, which is why, as Emily approaches her sister Adeline, she brings up the subject of her father doing his daughter forcefully. Adeline tries to apologize, but Emily simply leaps at her, screaming that Adeline was jealous of her. Adeline is too shocked to shoot the gun, which is why, when Joseph walks in and shoots Emily directly in the head, Adeline simply falls into his arms. So that's all it took. Fear for my own life, and I worship a child molester as if he was Lord Jesus himself. I could sense that something had changed. Lines were being drawn that night. It was us or them. We then see Joseph, Emily and Matthew escape with the horses. The ensuing chaos buys them enough time to reach their family, where the ambulance had crashed. Sadly, Uncle Eli gets bitten during the chaos, and Joseph shoots him directly in the head without a second thought. Adeline says that this is when their values had changed. John, her 8-year-old brother, and Paul, her 11-year-old brother, were both lost that night, but Adeline and the family gave them up in an instant. All the remaining family members grab a horse and then make their escape. They ride towards the hillside as Adeline tells us that 9 of them had managed to escape that night. We would all have died if it weren't for Dad. No one could have stood taller. I had forgiven him in that moment, but as I would come to know, I had sold my soul cheap. Crossed. Family Values, Chapter 2. Where is Kayleen? It has been a year now since the incident at the ranch. A lot has changed, including Adeline. She too has changed a lot. Adeline is perched high on top of a hill as she aims down on her scope and shoots a lone man running through the town below. It's her 19th birthday today, and she has just shot a man in the back. Adeline has changed, and this apocalyptic world has changed her because she has just killed the man for her own gain. Adeline wants to see how many of the crossed are around, and the screaming dying man will help her with that. She watches through her binoculars as a group of 6 crossed come and make the last moments of this man's life on earth a living hell. They sexually abuse and butcher him as Adeline continues to watch more and more crossed gather around him. The echo of the shot will confuse them enough so that Adeline can go around them to higher ground, where she'll be able to get a better count of the crossed. But things go bad real quick. By nightfall, hundreds of the crossed have gathered and are frantically searching the hills for who shot the man. Adeline did not expect so many of the crossed to be in this area. She has to make a hasty escape, and she rendezvoused back with her brothers Joseph and Matthew 2 weeks later. The 3 of them had been sent in different cardinal directions, east, west and south, to see how many of the crossed were around them. When they exchange information about what they found, they realize that things are getting worse. Adeline found at least a 100 crossed in the west. Matthew found way more in Salt Lake City. Even the temple was in ruins. Joseph tells Adeline, and she can't believe that Joseph still had hopes for the temple. She is too harsh on her older brother. She says he is the oldest, and he should know better. The crossed are nothing but animals. They don't care about temples or God. Adeline starts walking ahead out of frustration, and the 2 soon follow. She tells them that the spring is here, and they will no longer be saved by the cold. That is when Matthew walks up to her and types her to take it easy on Joseph. Joseph is still in rehab, and God is what he has found to hold on to. Afterward, Joseph saw in Salt Lake City they should be easy on him, because what Matthew and Joseph saw at the church was worse than hell. Bishops, cardinals, nuns, they had all changed, and once they were infected, they were targeting the children. We then get a glimpse of what Matthew and Joseph saw in Salt Lake City on the next page. The entire city was ablaze. The church was burning in the background, while the crossed churchgoers carried out their heinous acts in front of it. Little kids watched on in horror as the bishops killed, dismembered, and sexually exploited the nuns. They knew that once they were done with the women, it would be their turn. In the present day, Adeline apologizes to her big brother as they head home, and the next page shows us where home actually is. It is a huge farm located in the middle of nowhere, high up in the mountains, surrounded by a fence. Adeline tells us that they made their way here after passing through several states and learning that the crossed cannot survive the winter weather. Her father has named this farm New Paradise. As Adeline and her brothers approach the farm, she remembers how her father managed to learn from every death and every crossed encounter. She remembers how their view about the crossed changed when they came across the pilots from the Pope Air Force Base. They were all infected. They could still fly their jet fighters and were happily crashing them into the ground for fun. Adeline remembers that they were attacked by these pilots, but somehow all 9 of them managed to escape. She remembers how when they came to this valley, her father decided to stop running. They built everything from scratch, and the crossed did not come because they could not survive the winter. They built greenhouses for sustainable food. They took in survivors, but more importantly, took out the problematic ones. Dissension was the worst crying in the eyes of her father, and nobody dared to speak against him in this new farm. Adeline and her brothers are heartily welcomed back into the farm when they reach. When they sit down for lunch, Adeline's mother tells her that they have been using citrus to marinate the meat instead. They try not to light fires or create any sort of light that could attract the crossed. This is all well and good, but Adeline wants to meet Kayleen. Shay has brought a new telescope for her, and her mother frantically tells her that Kayleen is tending to Eli, their youngest brother. Adeline wants to take some food to Kayleen, but she is quickly cut off by her father. Their father looks like a completely different man now. He has grown a huge beard and has started talking about God more and more. He tells them that they have recently taken 4 good men that are devout Christians, and they have also added 10 more women to their group. Adeline then goes on to tell us that yes, her father's old ways were still present, and in these times, women were the most precious commodity. How else was one supposed to repopulate Earth? Adeline learns that the first baby on this farm was born last Tuesday. Adeline feels that they shouldn't get this comfortable. The crossed could arrive here any moment. God approves of what we're doing here, Addie. He will protect us. The Lord helps those who help themselves. Come, children. Their father then leads Joseph, Matthew, and Adeline to a shed where he is holding a crossed prisoner. The 3 children are taken aback by what they are seeing. The crossed man is missing his arms and legs. He is simply a stump. They all feel that this is dangerous, but their father feels that this is God's work. This all started when the father Joseph was out protecting the 4 men that they recently took in. The men were running from this crossed man when Joseph and her sister Hannah found them. Their father shot at the crossed man, but the wind changed the trajectory of the bullet, and their father took this as a sign that God did not want this crossed man dead, and that is when he started his experimentation to learn everything he could. He drained the man of his fluids, boiled, burned, and experimented on other parts of his body. But as their father is telling them the story, the crossed man suddenly wakes up. Their father quickly ushers them out, but before Adeline leaves, she hears the crossed man talking about her father abusing someone in the family again, and all for his pleasure. Once out, Adeline asks her father, "What was all that about?" And he quickly shuts the door and gets defensive. They pick up everything, twist it and throw it back. Evil is their drug. They need it every second. My shot took off that leg, but the rest, it did it to itself. Adeline knows something is wrong, but before she can say anything, her father grabs her by the shoulders and tells her that she and her brothers need to go back out again. He says that they need them to keep looking out for the crossed because spring is here and the snow has started to melt. The best scenario for them right now is to stay hidden, which is why he needs Adeline, Matthew, and Joseph out there. The night passes quickly, and in the morning, Adeline is already saying her goodbyes to everyone in the farm. Anna is the last one to wish her goodbye, and Adeline can't help but notice the baby bump she has. When she looks around the farm, there are only older men, and Hannah jokingly says, I thought you liked older men." Adeline chuckles and gets back to her horse, and then suddenly remembers about Kayleen. Her father tells Adeline that he has sent Kayleen to fetch some water and that she can meet her once she returns. On her way out, she meets another pregnant woman, and Adeline asks her who the father is. This is God's child, and Adeline deep down already knows that it is her father's child. Adeline, Matthew, and Joseph leave the farm behind. island and then part ways at their usual rendezvous point. Adeline then travels further, and by nightfall, she has reached her usual scouting area. As Adeline is lost in her thoughts and wondering about all the things that she just saw at the farm, she spots a group of survivors lighting a fire for their dinner. She scoffs at the naivety of the survivors and says that the crossed are dogs, and her dad was smart. He knew how to take care of dogs. But that is when it suddenly hits her. She remembers what the crossed man was saying, the frantic look on her mother's face when she asked about Kayleen, and how her father was always changing the subject when she brought it up. Adeline has just now realized that she was the dog and her dad was smart. He didn't want her on the farm. By morning, Adeline abandons her post and heads back to the farm. When she reaches, she bursts into her dad's room armed with a rifle, but another horrific sight is there to greet her. Her father is sleeping with her sister, Hannah, and this means that the child she is carrying belongs to her father. Hannah tries to tell Adeline that it was her own choice, but Adeline is not concerned about that right now. She wants to know where Kayleen is, and she wants to know now. Reluctantly, her father gets up, puts on his underpants, and then leads Adeline to a nearby shed. It was an accident, Addie. There was nothing to be done. Adeline has begun to cry by now. She knows that if the shed is locked, that nothing good awaits them on the other side. As she cries, she looks at Hannah and tries to tell her about Emily and what her father did to her, but Hannah tells her that this is different. Her father is a changed man now, and when the shed door is open, Adeline's worst nightmare comes true. In front of her is a crossed Kayleen, restrained to a makeshift table, and the worst part is that she is pregnant. The crossed Kayleen then smiles the same maniacal smile that is seen on every crossed's face and graphically describes to Adeline how she was assaulted by her father, Adeline's father. Crossed family values. Chapter 3. The Doomed Return. Watching her sister recite again and again how she got pregnant and how she was abused against her will by her own father throws Adeline off the edge. She swings around ready to point the gun at her father, but he is faster than her. He holds the gun down and then uses his other hand to smash Adeline's head into the doorframe. Blood spurts from her face like confetti from a cannon, and despite Hannah's screams, her father, Joseph, simply refuses to stop. But Adeline has had enough. She doesn't mind the pain and doesn't mind calling her father out for his heinous crimes. She calls him a murderer, a paedophile, a child rapist, but he screams back at her, "I am God's prophet, Adeline. Everything I do is by his will." We now head to the side of the country, miles away, which once used to be Adeline's scouting post. Sadly, her belongings and the post have now been discovered by the crossed. It is a group of 3, and 2 crossed men peer through her telescope and spot the group of survivors in the town ahead, while the remaining one sniffs at the poop Adeline left behind. One of the crossed men rejoices on finding the group of survivors. The second older man begins violating the telescope, while the third one is dancing with Adeline's poop on his head. Soon the entire town below is engulfed in flames, and the group of survivors is swarmed by the group of crossed. The crossed slowly grow in numbers as every survivor in town is converted, and once that happens, all hell breaks loose. We now catch up with Adeline again. She has been imprisoned in the same shed where the crossed man was kept initially. Her mother walks in and tells Adeline that it was maybe divine intervention, that the crossed man died the same day she was supposed to be imprisoned. Her mother offers her some food, while Adeline begs for her mother to see the truth, to see what her father did to Kayleen, how he first tried to use her as a child-bearing vessel and then got her infected. But her mother is unstable and too deluded. She says that this is all her fault. She tried to get Kayleen to understand the ways of the deed and how they're supposed to be operating now, but the young girl simply refused to acknowledge what her mother was saying. She went into the cell of the creature, and by the time the men tried to save Kayleen, it was already too late. "Oh, Addie, why did you come back now? In the fall the baby would have come and you wouldn't have had to see that." Even though her mother can't see the truth, Adeline, on the other hand, can. She tells her mother that Kayleen didn't wander off into the creature's cell. She entered intentionally to kill herself, all because of what her father did to Kayleen. Her mother is still refusing to give up the delusion. She feels that this is God's way and her father has been chosen as the new prophet. Adeline calls her mum disgusting, and her mother mother tries to defend herself by the same way she defended herself to Kayleen. She tells Adeline that this is the new way they're supposed to live on Earth. God has wiped everything clean so that they can start again, and only her father knows the way. God guides your father's hand. The line of the prophet must remain strong for the coming days. And was God speaking to him before, when he was doing Emily forcefully? Meanwhile, on the outside, Joseph is busy overseeing the building of a new church on the farm when Sam rides in and tells him that the Crossed have picked up Adeline's scent. There are too many of them to divert them now, and they will reach the Found by tonight. Joseph angrily walks into Adeline's cell and screams, "I should have named you Lilith, you devil spawn. Praise the Lord watches over us and we yet remain unseen. I pray they kill us all." Adeline, with her bruised eye and almost broken nose, calls her father out for who he actually is, a sick old man that likes to violate children. And while this confrontation carries out between Adeline and Joseph, out in the woods, the Crossed are slowly getting closer and closer to the farm. Two men from the farm, whose job it is to keep a lookout for anything dangerous, spot the Crossed inching closer to the farm. Meanwhile, back at the farm, the confrontation between Joseph and Adeline has turned physical. Joseph punches Adeline in the face and breaks her nose again just like a year ago. But unlike a year ago, Adeline does not flinch this time, nor is she horrified by her father's actions. She instead begins to laugh loudly, just like the Crossed. "The devil is in you, girl!" And this response only intensifies Adeline's emotions further. Laughing maniacally and with her face covered in blood, Adeline looks up and asks her father if that is the reason why he never did her like Emily. Meanwhile, in the woods, the two men who are keeping a watch on the Crossed are growing weary by each passing second. The younger one of them tries to take aim and shoot one of the Crossed when the older one stops him, because they will be discovered and the farm will have no way of knowing how close the Crossed have gotten to it. Sadly, in this tense moment, the young man ends up losing control over his trigger finger and the gun ends up firing. The bullet hits one of the Crossed in the head, but the old man knows it is already too late. Back in Adeline's holding cell, Joseph is showing his true colours. He manhandles Adeline, pushes her up against the wall, and then he proceeds to do what he did with Emily and Kayleen. Outside the cell in the farm, the men and women are scrambling to put up their defences. In the absence of Joseph, a pregnant woman has stepped up and taken the mantle of leader. She ordered them to set up the traps. While in the background, Adeline's mother asks for Joseph's whereabouts. Back in the woods, the young man who fired the shot is getting his face eaten by one of the Crossed, while the old man hastily tries to run away. Sadly, in his haste, he trips on one of his own traps and ends up getting stabbed in the neck. Back in Adeline's cell, Joseph is beyond angry. He points to the jar of blood he collected from the Crossed man that he had captured and tells Adeline that she is not his blood. She is instead this blood. She is full of evil, and just like the Crossed, a drop of this blood will reveal her true nature. The Crossed by now have reached the outer perimeter of the farm, but most of them are getting picked off by the defences set up by the farm. One of the Crossed trips over a wire which triggers an explosive that takes out a dozen of them. But this is not enough to keep their numbers back, which is why the pregnant women we saw earlier, who had taken the charge, orders the farm people to light the fire lines. With a hissing sound, a huge perimeter of fire engulfs the entire farm, and in the light of the fire, we see all the preparations that the people have made. They have put up fences, have set explosives, and even have a machine gunner. And for a moment, it seems like their plan is working, because the Crossed that were coming for the farm are all getting burned in the fire lines. An old man raises a middle finger, celebrating the short-lived victory, only for the pregnant moment to realise that they have doomed themselves, because, due to the fire, every Crossed in a 50-mile radius will now be able to spot them, and the fire won't be enough to hold them back, and so everybody starts firing in an attempt to buy as much time as possible. However, inside the farm, another horror show is unfolding, because Adeline's mother has now come into her cell and has caught her husband red-handed in the act. "My God, Joseph, what have you done?" "She is not our daughter," but Adeline's mother is not listening to him. She is instead helping her daughter down, who is covered in blood and barely breathing. She sets Adeline down and, with Joseph still on the other side of the cell wall, locks herself and Joseph inside. "Damn it, Joy, what are you doing? She's a beast. The devil is in her, and I need to go outside if the farm farm is to survive. Maybe we are not supposed to survive. By now, Adeline has woken up and she sees what her mother is doing, but Joy doesn't let her daughter interfere. She instead orders Adeline to go outside and help the family, and then Joy does the unthinkable. She takes the jar of blood and pours it all over herself. Within seconds, Joy has turned into the Crossed. A terrified and sweating Joseph turns towards his wife and says, "Joy, what have you done? How else was I going to be on top Joseph?" Joy strips her clothes, picks up a nearby lantern and smacks her directly into Joseph's face. Joseph's face is on fire and his right eye is badly injured. But Joy's plan has just started. She takes a knife, puts it between her legs and shoves it straight into her husband's open mouth. The knife stabs the back of Joseph's neck and then exits without a fuss. Adeline stands there horrified as she watches her mother kill her father. Groggily, she then stumbles outside, barely hanging onto her clothes as she witnesses the carnage the Crossed have unleashed upon the farm. Explosions are going off in every direction. People are running in all directions, and the Crossed are violating, killing, and dismembering everyone in sight. While Adeline is lost in a daze, a Crossed man catches her off guard and lunges at her. He is shot seconds before he can reach Adeline, and her savior is the same pregnant woman that took the charge. The remaining survivors are now all riding horses, and they offer a horse to Adeline as well. She thanks them and directs them towards a hidden trail that they can use to escape the farm. Adeline, meanwhile, has something to take care of, and in the next panel, we see that something is Kayleen. During the chaos, her little sister managed to get free and is now brutalizing and cannibalizing herself. No, not herself, her unborn child. With tears streaming down her face, Adeline has no choice but to shoot Kayleen. Adeline goes on to tell us that she lost her faith that day. This apocalypse, these Crossed men and women were not due to God, but in fact were created by some monster in his lab. And if Adeline wanted, she could have laid down there and died that day, but she didn't because she had a family to live for. We then see Adeline walk out of the cell and join the rest of the survivors. Sadly, they end up losing the machine gunner who is mobbed by the Crossed. For me, for Hannah, for Merrily, for Eli, for Joseph, and for Matthew, for my family, I chose to live. The group of survivors then rides into the night. Crossed family values. Chapter 4, Gaggles. We catch up with Adeline a few months later. She is observing a group of the Crossed from afar using her binoculars as she tells us that the survivors have now come to call these groups as gaggles, and throughout their observation, they have come to learn that a gaggle is usually limited to 15 Crossed. We then see one large Crossed woman take out a small man by kicking him brutally in the face. By killing the small man, the gaggle is now back to 15. The Crossed woman continues to stomp on the man's head until it is nothing but pulp, and Adeline tells us that when the Crossed aren't hunting, they go into some kind of stupor. The group of survivors is observing the gaggle from a trench nearby when Adeline orders them to attack. Yes, the Crossed may consume themselves someday if there is no human around, but that is going to take a long time, which is why Adeline has decided to help them along the way. As the group of survivors attack the gaggle, Adeline introduces us to the new additions to her group. The group is made up of 8 people, excluding baby Eli. Adeline, Hannah, Merrily, Jack and Kate were the core survivors. These were the people that accompanied me when they left New Paradise. The new additions are Liza and Mark, a married couple that recently lost a child, as well as a young kid who might be 17 years old named Jethro. The group has 8 horses and they are their lifeline. They do not require gas like vehicles and are extremely loyal, which is why they are essential for survival in this time. The group fights the gaggle valiantly, and we see Jethro shoot the Crossed in the head one after the other. The kid has great aim, which is why he was able to survive out there alone until he met Adeline and her group. Adeline's group makes quick work of the gaggle, but soon, due to the commotion, more Crossed or attracted to the location. This forces Kate to order everyone to retreat. Kate is their interim leader and Adeline's right hand. She is the same pregnant woman that saved Adeline back at the farm, and when the group begins retreating, we see that they are heading towards Hannah, baby Eli, and Merrily. Hannah is pregnant, and even if she wasn't, she was never the kind to participate in physical confrontations. But Merrily, on the other hand, is a growing child, and she has taken to the rifle rather naturally. As Adeline and the survivors approach them on horses with the crossed following them, we see Merrily take them out one by one with extreme precision. This gives them enough backup to turn around and finish off the rest of the crossed that are chasing them. Adeline then tells us that for every gaggle that the group takes out, they put a notch on their belts, and by the looks of it, they have taken out 14 gaggles so far. The group then rides far away and sets up camp in a remote location. Jack and Kate keep watch while the rest of them get some rest, but Adeline is wide awake. While evading the crossed and trying to find a safe place, the group entered Canada, but Adeline still worries about her brothers because summer is almost here, and by now, her brothers will be headed back towards New Paradise because they do not know what has happened there. Which is why the next morning, when everybody wakes up, Adeline has a conversation with Kate and Hannah and tells them that they will need to go back. Kate isn't surprised. Adeline had been acting weird for a few weeks now, and she knew this was the reason all along. And although Hannah tries to reason with Adeline and tell her that both Kate and her are pregnant and this is a safe place to have a baby, Adeline does not listen. She tells Hannah that they will get extra blankets and have her seated at the back of the wagon. And although this makes the two of them have an argument and Hannah won't speak to her for a few days now, Adeline doesn't mind. She's desperate to find her brothers. And so the group heads back, and a week later they reach Nebraska, where Adeline hopes to intercept Matthew. She knows that he will be passing through here, but before she can try and look for him, she has a bigger problem driving towards her. Adeline is busy looking over the map with Kate when Jack suddenly informs her of the 3 approaching cars that are driving towards them. The group looks up and watches 3 SUVs speeding towards them. The men in the SUVs quickly start circling them in an attempt to steal their horses. Hannah, Merrily, and baby Eli hide in the back of the wagon as the group tries to reason with the men. They say that the survivors should be hunting the crossed collectively rather than robbing each other of supplies, but these men can't be reasoned with. Their leader gives them a final chance to get off the horses, and that is when we see what Adeline has planned. She gives Merrily in the wagon a quick look, and the kid understands what she's supposed to do. The next second, Merrily is gone, and the slit from which she was peeking out is now sporting the barrel of a rifle unbeknownst to the men trying to rob them. Adeline then rides ahead a few steps and tries to reason with the men again. She says if they start shooting, then they could injure the horses, and then robbing them won't be of any use. The leader of the men is a chauvinistic pig, and when he curses at Adeline, all hell breaks loose. Adeline gives the signal, and without a second thought, Merrily shoots the leader directly in the neck. In the ensuing chaos, the group quickly starts escaping towards the hills. Shots are being fired in every direction, and in the desperation to kill the survivors, one of the men ends up shooting Kate's horse. But before Kate can hit the ground, she is saved by Jack in the nick of time. Jack pulls Kate onto his horse when we see that the leader of the men has somehow survived. He puts pressure on his bleeding neck when suddenly one of the men ends up shooting Jethro's horse. Thankfully, Jethro is near the wagon, which is why, when his horse gives up, he is able to hang on to it. Hannah uses all her power to pull Jethro back onto the wagon when we see the men's leader scream out, "God damn it! Stop shooting the goddamn horses!" When Jethro is pulled back onto the wagon, he has a large gaping hole in his stomach. Liza is now riding alongside the wagon, trying to keep the SUVs away from it, when suddenly one of the cars heads straight at her. In a desperate attempt to save his wife, Mark ends up riding close to the SUV while Merrily takes aim at the driver's head. She shoots and hits him straight between his eyes. But that is when things go wrong. As the SUV veers away, one of the men sitting in the back seat peeks out and shoots Mark directly in the back with a shotgun. Sadly, this is the end for Mark, and as an emotional, Liza rides towards him, she too gets shot in the hip. Sadly, because of this, the wagon gets captured by the men, and the 2 SUVs circle the wagon while their leader screams, "You up in the hills! We got your women and children! Get down here right now or I will!" And then the leader goes on to graphically describe what he is going to do with Merrily and Hannah. Up on the hill, Kate, Jack and Adeline discuss how they're going to approach this situation, but according to Adeline, there is no discussion to be had. She refuses to listen to Jack and Kate's pleas, loads both her revolvers, and then rides her horse downhill directly towards the men, guns blazing. Although for a moment this looks like a heroic act, everything soon comes to a stop when one of the men shoots Adeline's horse in the leg. The horse stumbles and Adeline falls face first into the ground. Kill them all!" screams the men's Adeline's leader when something unexpected happens. Out of nowhere, the leader gets shot in the head, which splatters his brain all over the car. Confused and surprised at the same time, Adeline looks around to see who took the shot, and she sees a lone cowboy approaching them while shooting at the cars. As the gunman gets closer, we see that it is none other than Matthew. Adeline screams out in delight as she sees Jack and Kate join Matthew. All of them begin fighting their guns at the SUV and turn it into a bloodbath. The entire car is riddled with bullets with blood, gore, guts and brains lining every part of it. The remaining pickup truck tries to make an escape, but Jethro quickly shoots its tires. We then see the group unload everything that they have into the remaining pickup truck that Jethro stopped. Jethro and Adeline shoot the truck angrily, while Liza shoots at it with tears in her eyes because she just lost her husband Mark. Soon, the entire pickup truck is riddled with bullets, and we don't need to look inside to see what happened to the men. Once it is all done, Matthew and Adeline have an emotional reunion. Adeline tightly wraps Matthew in an embrace, as she tells us that this was one of the best moments she had had in months. That although a few minutes later she would have to come to terms with all that had happened, she still remembers this moment vividly. She would have to come to terms with the fact that Mark was dead. Jethro and Liza were badly injured. Half of their horses were dead, and the worst part is that because of the lack of horses, they won't be able to intercept her other brother, Joseph, in time. And what's worse than that is the fact that she, Matthew and Joseph will have to meet their crossed mother when they reach New Paradise. Crossed family values. Chapter 5, Motherly Love. This time we catch up with Adeline at a hospital. The group was forced to make a stop in a nearby town because Hannah had gone into labour, and although they were equipped with basic supplies, they needed specialised equipment and medicines to help Hannah with her birth. Adeline is outside the NICU, watching all the decomposing corpses of the dead babies inside it. After all that she has been through, Adeline has been desensitised to almost everything. These mangled, decomposing corpses of babies have no effect on her. She continues to stare at them, while in the background we hear Hannah trying to give birth. She has been in labour for 6 hours, and the entire atmosphere of the hospital isn't doing her any favours. Blood-covered walls, decomposing bodies, the stench of death in the air. All of this makes for a horrific scene, and yet this is where Hannah is supposed to give birth. After much effort with Kate watching over the entire thing, Hannah is finally able to give birth to a baby boy. Even as she watches the birth of a new life, Adeline can't help but think about her own. She tells us that they have been stopped here for 2 days, and they are almost a week late from intercepting Joseph. Hannah names her newborn Adam, as if he's the first kid to be born in this new world, and maybe he is. Adeline can't be sure about that. Everyone except Adeline is overjoyed at the birth of Adam. Baby Eli, Merrily, Jethro, Matthew, and even Jack, all of them join hands to celebrate Adam's birth. Kate holds the baby close to her face with tears in her eyes. After all, she too is going to be a mum soon. Adeline, meanwhile, is outside the room, slowly watching everyone celebrate with the look of disapproval on her face. And maybe Adeline isn't wrong to be sporting this look. After all, she is the leader of the group, which is why she has to worry about things that nobody else thinks about. And right now, she is worried about everybody. Adeline walks through the blood-covered corridor as she tells us that they have 10 people in their group. Now, if they count baby Adam, only 5 of them are capable survivors, and that is including pregnant Kate and Merrily. Kate is bound to give birth in the next week or so, and Merrily is just an 8-year-old kid. We see that Adeline is walking out of the hospital so that she can talk to Liza, who is the only other person in their group who couldn't care less about Adam's birth. Adeline tells us that since her husband was killed, Liza has not spoken a word to anyone. They were able to get the bullet out of her hip, but because none of them are doctors, she likely isn't going to walk straight the rest of her life. Liza is smoking a cigarette, staring in the distance, when Adeline comes and sits on the bench beside. She tries to tell Liza that it is a baby boy, but only gets one-word answers as a response. Silence engulfs them for a minute or two when Liza finally decides to speak up. Liza has been observing the crows in the area her and is staring at one right now. She watches the crows fly through the air as she begins to tell Adeline how she understands what Adeline is worried about. She asks Adeline what she's going to do now that she has 2 more babies added to the group. Not only that, Liza and Jethro are crippled, so they won't be any help either. Are you going to haul us all over the place while running from them? Where are you going to raise the kids? There is clearly disdain in Liza's voice. We then see why Liza has been keeping an eye on the crows. They are constantly searching for food, and right now they are picking apart a dead deer carcass. Adeline knows better. She knows why Liza is so angry. She knows she hasn't apologized to Liza yet about Mark's death. Adeline apologizes to Liza and tells her that if they had stopped to help Mark or to get his body back, they would all have been killed. But this is not why Liza is in such a bad mood. She tells me that she took the correct call and it is not her fault that she is angry. Liza can't help but feel hate. Right now, she is full of hate. Liza feels that there is no future in this world for her now. She used to have things that she could look forward to, used to have a husband, a child, but now she has nothing. This is my last stop, Addie. I'm just going to sit here and wait for them to come. And when they do, I'm going to kill every last one of them. We then get a close-up of the deer carcass that the crows have been picking on. The crows pull out chunks of flesh from its eyes and nose, while flies and maggots devour the rest of its body. Adeline walks back inside the hospital and requests a meeting with Kate and Matthew. Hannah tries to get her to say hello to her new nephew, but Adeline seems to be avoiding him all along. She takes Kate and Matthew to the other room and discusses her plan with them. Adeline plans to leave for New Paradise on her own. She says that if she goes alone on a single horse, she should be able to make it in time to meet Joseph. Kate nods and agrees with her plan. She thinks Adeline is right, and leaving alone should help her cover lost time easily, because none of them will be ready to travel anytime soon. Matthew then chimes in and says that he will also go with Adeline, because Joseph is his brother too. Adeline then turns towards Kate and says, if we're not back in 4 weeks, then we're likely not coming. Okay, from the look of this town, things have been quiet here for a while, but if there is trouble, Adeline, try at the rendezvous point at 3-month intervals. Matthew and Adeline wish their goodbye to Kate and start leaving when Kate suddenly asks Adeline if she is going to say goodbye to Hannah or not. Matthew looks on dejectedly as Adeline says that she will meet Hannah and Adam once she gets back. A certain realization dawns upon Matthew that his little sister has grown up too fast. She has seen too many things and has now grown cold and desensitized to everything. As Matthew and Adeline leave, Adeline can't help but feel great. Being back on the horse with wind in her hair and out here in the wilderness, Adeline can't help but feel great, leaving the rest of the others behind. Riding as an activity is comforting to her, maybe too comforting, because an hour or two later, Matthew has to stop her. She is pushing her horse too hard, adding if she continues, she could risk killing it. Matthew then realizes why Adeline has been riding so fast, because when she turns around, she has tears streaming down her face. Matthew realizes that his little sister is close to her breaking point, which is why he decides to give her a warm hug. The two of them then find a good spot to settle down for the night, and that is when Adeline opens up to Matthew. She tells Matthew how desensitized she has become. There are 2 babies about to join their group, yet if it was up to her, she would trade them for horses within a heartbeat. She confesses that deep down in her heart, she wants to simply keep going once they find Joseph without joining back with the group. Am I wrong for thinking this way, Matthew? It's not wrong. You also don't mean it. You're too hard on yourself, Adeline. You always took the lion's share of responsibility. You were the first one to stand up to Dad, and I guess that's why we follow you. Matthew then goes on to reassure Adeline. He tells her that although he isn't religious anymore and does not have any faith, he was still brought up in a religious household, which is why somewhere deep down, he believes that Adeline still has a little faith. He tells her to find that little bit of faith and keep it, because living without it in this new world is going to be very tough. Adeline and Matthew continue traveling towards New Paradise for 5 days without an incident. But when they reach near the property, things start to get dire. They stumble upon a huge graveyard of cars and humans, and this means that the Crossed are still active in this area. Hundreds of cars have been crashed and piled on top of each other intentionally. Many more stakes rise up from the ground, with dismembered limbs, heads and bodies hanging on from them. The next page takes us to Joseph, who has already reached New Paradise. Sadly, he has been captured by the Crossed and is currently being tortured by them. Joseph struggles furiously as he realizes what is coming for him. Veins stick out of his neck due to the shear strain, but he is unable to break free. A crossed man and woman hold him down and force him to open his mouth, while another one of them unzips. The man urinates into Joseph's mouth, and before you know it, Joseph has turned into the crossed. But the mayhem has just begun because Joseph wants more, and with a swift move, Joseph bites down and relieves the crossed man of his manhood. The crossed have lit up a campfire and are having a deity around it. Some roast meat, others dance around it, while some indulge in acts of depravity. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoes in Joseph's ears, and he quickly turns his head around. It's his mother, and she has somehow managed to survive till now. Because she is a crossed, and depravity is the name of the game, she lulls Joseph into sleeping with her. Like a hungry animal, Joseph attacks his mother's body while the rest of the crossed watch on and laugh maniacally. The next morning, somewhere not far away from this site, Matthew and Adeline are searching for signs of the crossed when Adeline discloses her plan to Matthew. She has pondered over Matthew's words and has decided to come up with the new plan. Her new plan is to go back to the others once they have found Joseph and then head south. Matthew asks why she has chosen south instead of north, and Adeline tells him that she gets the feeling that too many people are going to head north and people scare her more than the crossed. With children on the way and crippled people on their team now, they need to find a place where they can call home. And just like the north, there aren't going to be many crossed in the desert. They can head to Arizona or New Mexico, where they can also find wild horses in the desert. Adeline says that once they have horses, they can defend themselves. She then goes on to tell Matthew about Jack and how he's a builder who can help them build. He thinks we could get some wind generators going, maybe even solar. I think we'd have electricity and running water before too long. People have skills. We won't all have to be fighters. Adeline continues to talk about her plan when Matthew suddenly spots a vulture flying away. Vultures mean fresh dead meat, and fresh dead meat usually means the crossed. The two of them follow the vultures and come across a dead horse. A fresh horse corpse here means that it's Joseph's. Adeline rushes towards the corpse and shoos the vultures away, while Matthew takes a look at the belongings. He confirms that the horse and the belongings definitely belong to their brother Joseph. Hearing this, Adeline quickly gets on her horse and begins riding away. "Adeline, don't try and stop me, Matthew." Who said anything about stopping? The two of them get on their horses and quickly ride away, determined to exact revenge in the name of their brother. Soon, they come across a group of the crossed and quickly start taking them out. It's a gaggle of 6 crossed men and women, and within minutes, Matthew and Adeline have wiped away every one of them. They ride ahead for a few more feet, expecting the crossed to show up due to the recent gunshots, when it occurs to Matthew that Joseph could have been turned and could be among them. Adeline hangs her head low in shame and tells Matthew that if Joseph has indeed been turned, then they will kill him. Soon, what they were expecting happens. Out of the woods, 2 crossed men walk out, and then they are followed by a dozen of them. They begin climbing the hill towards Matthew and Adeline, and that is when Adeline reveals how she plans to take care of them. When she was at the hospital, she managed to grab a few bottles of alcohol, which she has used to create Molotov cocktails. She takes out her lighter, lights one of the cocktails and throws it at the crossed. The Molotov cocktail is effective, but the crossed don't care. It burns 2 or 3 of them, but the rest keep coming. Matthew quickly formulates a plan and tells Adeline that he will lead them all away from her so that she can go inside the forest and look for Joseph. Matthew then begins firing his rifle and draws the attention of every crossed man and woman in the area. Once they are focused on him, Adeline quickly rides into the forest in a desperate attempt to save her brother. She continues riding and riding till midnight, and that is when she finally reaches the campfire, the crossed men and women lit yesterday. She takes a look around and finds dozens of men tied to stakes by their hands, simply left out to rot. Adeline thinks her horse is spooked by the corpses and tries to calm it down, but soon finds out that it is not the corpses that are spooking the horse, but rather his mother and Joseph. Joseph carries his mother on his shoulders, while both of them describe the heinous acts they have carried out. Joseph also admits to abusing their sister Emily, just like their father, and Adeline has had enough. Within a second, she lights another Molotov cocktail and throws it at Joseph. Adeline's crossed brother now burns to a crisp as their mother falls from his shoulders. Without a second thought, Adeline starts riding back quickly in a desperate attempt to reach Matthew before anything happens. Matthew is the only family she has left, and she doesn't plan on losing him. When she reaches Matthew's location, she finds the place littered with crossed corpses. One of them is still alive and tries to reach for Adeline, but she quickly shoots him in the head. Thankfully, Matthew is still alive and has managed to survive, and the two of them quickly decide to make their escape. I was so grateful to see that Matthew was okay. It drove me despite what happened to Joseph. I left that valley knowing more than ever that I was right. I needed to gather our friends and family and make us a new home. First time in a long time, I had hope. But unbeknownst to both Matthew and Adeline, their mother has managed to survive the fire, and she has been following Adeline all this while. Joy, their mother, watches Adeline and Matthew ride away into the night while holding Joseph's severed head. Mama will never leave her babies. She will find you, and she will do whatever it takes to find you. Joy screams into the night while sporting the same menacing smile that can be spotted on every crossed. Crossed Family Values, Chapter 6. What's the difference? This issue of the comic opens up on quite a gruesome scene. Joy and another crossed man are fornicating in a brutal manner. It's a gruesome scene of blood, gore, violence, and sex at the same time. Once the two of them are finished, Joy uses the severed head of Joseph that she carries around with her to bash in the crossed man's face. She then uses the head to break open all of his ribs, and once that is done, she uses her bare hands to rip open his entire chest. She then pulls out all of his guts and tosses them aside. Once she has created enough space, she crawls inside and settles down in a fetal position, all ready and comfortable to spend the night. Like always, Joy is fixated on finding her children. The last panel shows us a wider view of the scene, and we see a group of crossed a few feet away from her camping around a fire. It seems that Joy is more coherent and intelligent after turning into the crossed, and she seems to be able to lead the other crossed wherever she goes. We then catch up with Adeline and Matthew, who are busy travelling back to the hospital where they left Kate, Jethro, Hannah, Liza, Merrily, and baby Eli. It has taken them 6 days to reach back where they started. Throughout the entire journey, the two of them have been talking about their childhood, but now that it is the last day and they are reaching near the hospital, the reality is slowly creeping back to Adeline. Matthew tries to take her mind off of the things by noticing and mentioning how beautiful the entire scene around them looks, but Adeline can't help it. She is depressed. They will be at the hospital by noon, and they will find out if their friends have survived, have run away, or worse, have turned into the crossed. There's a hole in my chest too, Adeline, for Joseph, for Mum, but there's beauty in the world. If we stop seeing it, we're just like those guys in the trucks, no better than the crossed. Adeline tries telling her brother that what she saw in the forest changed her. You didn't see them, Matthew. You didn't see what Mum and Joseph had become. You didn't see Kayleen either. I'm glad that you didn't. But you didn't see them. It changes you. Matthew tries to tell her that he is there for her, that all of their friends are there for her, but that does not matter to Adeline anymore. All she is focused on right now is keeping everyone safe, and that is what she is going to do. It is almost noon, and Liza is sitting on the bench outside, just like she was when Adeline left. She is keeping watch, and when she hears hooves clamping down on the asphalt, she picks up her shotgun, fearing the worst. But when she looks to the right, she sees Adeline and Matthew approaching on their horses. Matthew greets her warmly as he gets down from his horse, while Adeline asks about Kate and her baby. Did Kate manage to have the baby while they were gone? But Liza doesn't respond. She simply groans as though in agreement, and then goes back to her watch. Adeline is confused. She tries to talk to Liza again, but Matthew interrupts her. He knows that the woman is going through hell, and he doesn't want Adeline prodding at her. Before Adeline can say anything more, Jack's voice interrupts them both. He's on top of the hospital. He greets them warmly and tells them. Then he spotted them coming from a mile away. Matthew and Adeline head inside for the happy reunion. Merrily is busy playing with baby Eli, while Jethro is taking care of Hannah's child. He says that Jack told everyone that he saw them coming from a mile away an hour ago. He can't believe it took them so long to reach the hospital. Merrily runs into her big brother's arms and embraces him. She tells Matthew that she wished on the North Star, just like he told her. Jethro tries to ask about Joseph, but Adeline dismisses him. She instead wants to know about Kate, and Jethro tells her that Kate is in labor. A big smile spreads across Adeline's face, but Jethro tells her to calm down. Sadly, this isn't good news because Kate has been in labor for the past 2 days. The baby is breech, which is why there have been complications. Hannah is with Kate right now, trying to help her give birth. Adeline is worried about Kate and starts walking away towards the ward where she's giving birth, but then Jethro stops her. He hesitates for a moment, but then finally decides to come clean. He tells Adeline that while they were gone, he and Hannah decided to get married. Hannah thinks she didn't hear him right. She quickly turns around and asks Jethro to repeat himself. Jethro stammers again, puts his head down, but then slowly tells Adeline the truth. He tells her that Hannah and him stood in front of everyone and read their vows. He says that he would have waited for Adeline to ask her permission, but the world being the way it is, they decided to go ahead with it. Adeline is simply flabbergasted and appalled. Jethro is barely 18. How could her sister do that? Jesus Christ, whatever, says Adeline as she dismisses Jethro and walks towards the ward. Matthew, meanwhile, is completely unaware of this and is busy playing with his little brother and sister, Merrily and baby Eli. She bursts into the room and screams, "What the hell is going on, Hannah?" Hannah, who has been busy taking care of Kate all this while, spins around totally surprised by Adeline's arrival. She tells Adeline that she has been too worried about her and Matthew, but Adeline isn't having any of this. She says if she was so worried, then how come she had time to get married? Hannah tries to ease her into the news, but Adeline is simply too angry. Hannah has no choice but to match her anger, and she hasn't been happy with Adeline's behaviour lately anyways. She screams at Adeline that Jethro loves her. When did that happen, Hannah? Between getting raped by Dad and running for your life, when did you have time to fall in love? Jesus, Adeline, we're not all robots like you. But when it dawns on Hannah what Adeline just said, sorrow spreads across her face. She tells Adeline that, unlike Emily, Dad did not assault her. It was she who made the mistake of going to him, something she shouldn't have done. But her and Jethro, they are different. She tells Adeline that Jethro really loves her and is ready to die for her. He almost died for her when the men in the trucks attacked them. That this kind of love is hard to find, especially in a world like this. When Hannah says that Jethro is a good man, Adeline corrects her by saying that he is a kid, and that is when Hannah retorts by saying, "I didn't see you make that distinction when you put a rifle in Merrily's hand." Adeline sighs, and Hannah uses this opportunity to divert her attention towards Kate. She tells Adeline that the baby's breech and that the cord is stuck beneath its bottom. The labour is stalled for now, and unless they can turn the baby around, Kate has very little chance of surviving. If there was a doctor here, he could have done a cesarean operation, which would have saved both Kate and the baby. But the way things are looking right now, only one of them can be saved. It is then that Kate wakes up again. Sweat beads up on her forehead as she realises that Adeline and Matthew are back. Kate has been the closest to Adeline since they left New Paradise, which is why, upon seeing her wake up, Adeline quickly takes her hand and says that they are going to take a ranch in horse country. She helps Kate relax by spinning dreams of how life would be once they have built the ranch. She tells her that they'll have plenty of horses, plenty of food, and everything will be all right. But Kate, being the person that she is focused on the current and now, and she knows that the way things are going, either her or the baby will survive. She tells Adeline to save the baby if it comes down to that. Adeline's entire face suddenly droops low. She leans in and tells Kate that she needs her, but Kate knows Adeline, and she makes her swear that she will save the baby if it comes down to that. Somewhere far from the town, we see Joy wearing the crossed man's skin like some sort of horrific hoodie. This is the same crossed man that she killed at the start of the comic. She has severed the limbs and cut up the skin to fashion some sort of gruesome garb for herself. She walks in the middle of the road while singing a song that she has made up, a song that reflects on her psyche and gives us a glimpse into what she has planned. She remembers how she was raised in a devout Christian family, only to be a baby-making machine. But now she has different plans, and these plans involve her children. We slowly see that Joy is being followed by one crossed man, which soon turns into a dozen as the scene pans away. The next page page shows us the scene from the sky, and it reveals that Joy now has the power to lead a gaggle of more than 15 crossed. As she sings her gruesome song and walks through the middle of the road, every crossed nearby starts following her. Soon, she has gathered a decent-sized crowd as she makes her way through the country. Back at the hospital, Kate is busy pleading with Adeline to save the baby when we see Liza spot something on the outside. Adeline is telling Kate that it is imperative that she saves her because Kate is everything. She is the glue that holds the group together, and she is the one who makes everything work. Adeline promises Kate they will surely build something safe where she can be a mother again. On the outside, we see Liza panic as if she has seen the crossed. On the inside, Kate is trying to make Adeline see that if her baby dies, she would be devastated, and she would be no more useful to her than Liza currently is. Suddenly, Kate's contractions begin to happen again, and on the outside, we see Liza grab the shotgun. Hannah quickly comes to Kate's aid and tells Adeline that this is going to be rough. They're going to have to turn the baby around somehow. Adeline tells Hannah to do anything and everything that she can do to help Kate. She wants the baby turned around, no matter whatever it takes. On the outside, we see Liza, who is now raging furiously, stand up and then fire the shotgun. Come on, come get me!" she screams as she continues firing. The gunshots take everyone by surprise. Adeline quickly jumps to her feet, and Jack, who is keeping an eye from the roof, quickly rushes to Liza's aid. But once Jack gets down from the roof and reaches Liza, things aren't as they seem. Liza is laughing maniacally and claiming that she has defeated the crossed. Jack grabs her by the shoulders and shakes her. This snaps Liza back to reality, and she realizes what she has done. She was firing at nothing, and her mind was rattled to say the least. "Jack, I thought, they're never coming, are they? They are mocking me." "Honey, you're just tired and hungry. Head inside and get something to eat." By now, Adeline is on the outside and desperately wants to know why the shots were fired. She watches Liza walking inside and tries to ask her questions, but as usual, Liza doesn't respond. Instead, Jack calls Adeline over and tells her what happened. He tells Adeline that it was a false alarm and that didn't see anything. Liza was firing into the air, but Adeline is furious because this is bad. The gunshots will be heard for miles, and if there are any of the crossed around, they will start making their way here. Adeline walks back into the hospital, prepares a meal for Liza, and then hands it to her. "Here you go, Liza, Mom. Just get that in you and you'll feel much better." The sarcasm in Adeline's voice is quite heavy. We then see her walk into the lobby defiantly and order everyone to get ready and packed up within 10 minutes. Matthew tries to calm down Adeline by saying that this is a good spot, and likely no one will show up here. And before Adeline can shoot his idea down, Hannah screams from the ward, "We can't go anywhere! I don't have time to explain, but if you go without me and Kate." Jack too tries to reason with Adeline by telling her that they have an advantage here. They have the high ground, and they can spot anyone coming from miles away. But Adeline tells him that this advantage is all but lost if he doesn't get back to his post soon. Matthew tries to interject, but soon the entire conversation is interrupted by a loud screech. It is baby Eli, and he's squirming in the arms of Liza, who holds a gun to his head. What used to be an episode or two has now transformed into full-blown madness. Liza has gone crazy, and she's talking nonsense. Tears are streaming down on her face as she calms down Eli and tells everyone that the world has gone crazy. She says that the world has shown itself that it is made for the crossed, and they can't run from them. We can't run from it. We can't even treat each other decently in the face of it. "God damn it, you let him go or I'll blow your brains out," screams Adeline while Jack tries to use a different approach. Whenever Liza would have an episode, Jack would be there to comfort her and bring her back to her senses, and he is going to try to do that now. Matthew tells him to be careful, and Jack slowly creeps towards Liza while asking her to stay calm. Once he is close to Liza, she puts the gun directly at baby Eli's head. Jack tries to calm her down by telling her to remember everything that they have talked about at length, and that she does not want to do this. But Liza has gone full crazy. She screams that she is doing nothing but saving Eli from all the horrors that lie out there. "I'm saving him, and I'm saving you too." With a swift move, Liza points the gun to Jack's head and blows his brains out. His entire brain explodes in splatters on the ground behind him. Matthew has seen enough. He is determined to take the gun away from Liza. He steps forward and angrily tries to smash the gun away from Liza, but Adeline screams for him to stop. She knows that Liza has gone crazy and she could do anything. anything, and she's right. Because as Matthew tries to snatch the gun away from Liza, she ends up shooting baby Eli directly in the head. Liza struggles with Matthew to grab the gun when a raging Adeline jumps in and smashes a butt of her pistol into Liza's face. With Liza now on the ground, Adeline begins to stomp on her face with the heel. She keeps stomping on Liza's face up until it is nothing but pulp, and even then she doesn't stop until she has broken Liza's neck with a kick. Matthew looks up in horror, refusing to believe what just happened. He can't believe that Adeline killed Liza, and moreover, that Liza shot baby Eli. Merrily and Jethro are horrified. The two kids are scared, and they stand as far away from the bodies as possible while looking in horror at Adeline. Adeline is grunting like a maniac, and the scene in front of them is nothing short of what a Crossed would have done. Liza's face is covered in blood. Her eye sockets are empty, and her left eye is hanging outside, barely held on by a tendon. Adeline bends down and picks up baby Eli's body in her arms with tears in her eyes. A few minutes later, we catch up with Matthew, who dejectedly walks outside with a shovel in his hand. Adeline is already outside preparing flowers with a wrapped body of baby Eli beside her. None of them utters a word. Matthew simply walks up with her and starts digging Eli's grave. Inside the hospital, Jethro is mourning the death of Jack. Jack was a good man, and he was almost like a father figure to Jethro. He can't believe that Adeline forgot about him and never even looked at him. Merrily and Hannah stand beside him and try to comfort him, but with tears in his eyes, Jethro turns towards Hannah and says, "We need to leave. She wants to go south and start a ranch. She's leading us right to them. She's just like what you told me about her daddy, following her own glory, which is a sin to the Lord, you know. She's crazy, and she's going to get us all killed." Hannah's entire demeanor has changed. She looks sad at Jethro in disgust and tells him to shut up. Back on the outside, Matthew is apologizing to Adeline for never seeing things the way they were. It was Adeline who saw things clearly, and she was the one who had the sense of right and wrong. "Yeah, and I did such a good job with it," says Adeline sarcastically. "You tried, and you held us together, Adeline. If only Joseph and I had backed you up." "What, Matthew? None of this would have happened." The two burst out laughing momentarily, clearly unable to process their emotions. Within a split second, Adeline and Matthew go back to their former selves. Adeline vows to never let another Pratt die on her watch, and Matthew looks at her, stares into her eyes, and says, "I believe you." The last page of this format gives us a glimpse of Joy. She continues to walk on the road, wearing the crossed man's skin, but by now she has amassed a huge crowd of the crossed. She constantly recites the name of her children as she continues to track them down using her sense of smell. Crossed Family Values, Chapter 7, Grace. This is it, guys. This is the last issue. Adeline is outside of the hospital, taking care of the horses while Kate is still struggling to give birth on the inside. Jethro and Matthew are busy burying the bodies of Liza and Jack, and all of them have forgotten that it was Jack's duty to keep a lookout. All of them except Merrily. The 8-year-old rifle-wielding badass kid is the only one who remembers Jack's duty, and right now, she is the only one climbing the ladder to the roof to take a peek outside. Adeline, meanwhile, is busy questioning her faith again. She is reminded of how faith was taught to them, belief in something despite all evidence to the contrary, and how at this point she has nothing but faith. Most of them were dead by their own hands than anything the Crossed ever did to them. By this time, Merrily has managed to climb to the top, and when she looks outside, horror courses through her veins. It is a sight no child should ever witness on her own. She quickly climbed down the ladder while being terrified to her core, and all this while she keeps screaming out Adeline's name. But as she's running along a lower roof, she hears her mother's voice calling out to her, and Merrily is right. It is her mother. She turns towards the tree line and sees her crossed mother walking towards her wearing someone's skin. Her mother then removes the man's face like a hood and reveals herself. For a moment, the kid that had died inside Merrily suddenly wakes up. All the memories of her childhood, all the time that she spent with her mother, comes flooding back to her. Her mother has now removed the man's skin and has let it fall to her waist. She spreads her arms wide in an angelic pose and continues walking towards Merrily. "Mama has come all this way to find you, sweetheart. Mama wants her baby back." But then a sudden change of mood. Joy smiles, the same smile that is spread across every Crossed's face. She then points her tongue out menacingly and says what she has planned. concerned for Merrily. She wants her daughter back up inside her. This instantly snaps Merrily out of her daze. She fumbles with the rifle and points it at her mother, but her instincts are still well and good. Despite the sudden shock and horror of the moment, Merrily manages to shoot her mother in the shoulder. Joy falls to the ground with a loud thud, with blood spraying out of her shoulder, and that is when Merrily lets out a gruesome shriek. This catches Adeline's attention, who quickly turns towards Merrily's direction. She runs towards the direction of the gunshot and sees that Matthew and the rest have also heard it. She's joined by Matthew Jethro and her Jethro's new baby when they hear Merrily climbing down from the roof while screaming, "I shot Mummy! I shot Mummy! Mummy's here! There's lots more! Lots and lots!" Jethro and Matthew are troubled by what they hear, but they don't understand what it means, but Adeline does. She knows what her mother has become, and if she is here, then it means nothing good is going to come out of it. Adeline orders Matthew and Jethro to quickly go and get the horses, but that is when Matthew poses their biggest problem to Adeline, that they only have 3 horses and there are 6 of them, and that is excluding the babies. Adeline's face is filled with anger, but it is also filled with determination. She turns towards Jethro and says, "Jethro, do you love my sister?" "Yes, Mom." "Then you make her come with us any way possible, even if you have to knock her out and drag her out with you." She takes the baby from Jethro and lets him go to fetch Hannah. Adeline, meanwhile, hands the baby to Matthew and tells him to saddle the horses. She says that if Kate isn't able to make it, they will ride without her. Matthew simply nods, but deep down inside, he fears something. What happens if Kate manages to survive? What if her baby survives? Will they be able to carry 2 newborns with them? Back inside the hospital, Jethro has a gun in his hand as he bursts through the door of Kate's ward. He urgently tells Kate and Hannah that the Crossed have surrounded them and they need to leave now. But neither Hannah nor Kate gave him any attention. Hannah, especially this time, is focused on helping Kate give birth to her new baby. She has worked with her all these hours and all these days, and she's going to see it through. When Jethro tries to get close to her in an attempt to snatch her away, Hannah simply elbows him in the nose. With a loud crack, Jethro's nose breaks as he lands on the floor. Blood gushes out of it as a bedazzled Jethro looks up at Hannah in surprise. He cannot believe Hannah just hit him, but she is too focused on helping Kate give birth. Kate's baby was a breech, but somehow, through some miracle, Hannah has managed to turn it around, and she can now see its head poking out. The next second, a symphony of cries echoes throughout the hospital. Hannah screaming for Kate to give it everything she has got, Kate screaming in pain, and Jethro crying out and slamming his fists on the ground out of frustration. And in that moment, in that symphony of cries, it finally happens. Kate's suffering comes to fruition and her new baby girl is born. But that is when all hell breaks loose. A group of the Crossed have managed to breach the perimeter of the hospital and have jumped in through a window. Thankfully, Jethro has done his job, because the next second, he, Hannah, Kate and her new baby girl all burst out of the hospital through the front door. Matthew and Adeline are already there, waiting for them with the horses, but they have another problem at hand. Their horses are tired, and there is no way that they will be able to escape the Crossed on tired horses carrying 2 people each. But something has changed in Adeline, because instead of panicking, she simply comes up with a new plan. "Get out the lanterns," she says to Matthew as she looks into the distance ominously. The next panel shows us the havoc wreaked by the Crossed in and around the hospital. They are destroying cars, burning trees, killing and sexually exploiting their own, when suddenly 3 horses quickly whiz by them. One of them notices the horses and realizes that Adeline and the survivors are escaping, and they cannot let this happen. Every one of them decides to chase after the horses. Everyone except Joy, because Joy is the one who led them here, and she was able to lead them here because she could smell her children. Somehow, she seems to have evolved and has developed a superhuman sense of smell. She sniffs the air and then begins to walk in the opposite direction of the Crossed. Joy walks through the massacre as though it is her playground. She still carries Joseph's head with her as though it is her personal property. The Crossed kill, sexually abuse and dismember their own around her, but as though she is in a daze, Joy walks through them, following the scent without making a single move or sound. As Joy walks through the hospital, we get a glimpse at what the Crossed are doing. The NICU that had the dead, decomposing corpses of hundreds of babies is being ravaged by them. Some of the Crossed are playing with the corpses as though they are tiny action figures, while others are eating them. When Joy reaches the ward where Kate gave birth, we see that a group of crossed are already there. One of them is lying on a gurney and is using his spilled out guts to pretend that he has just given birth to a new baby. One of the crossed is eating any and every pill that he can find in the room, while a pair of them is fornicating in the chair. Joy simply walks up to the gurney, bends down, and then picks up the fluids on the floor using her fingers. She then gives them a quick lick and sniff and realizes that this does not belong to her children. But either way, the scent is fresh and Joy can now easily track them. Out in the streets of the town, the crossed are still busy massacring anything they can find. One of the crossed, who is smoking a makeshift cigarette, is sitting on the curb, while a fat one stomps onto the back of another until it breaks. There is a sewer grate near them, and Adeline is looking up at them through it. The survivors escape the attack using the sewers and use the horses with lanterns as a distraction. They are currently taking a breather in this dead end, while Jethro, Matthew, and the rest of them keep watch. Matthew walks up to Adeline and tells her that they have another problem at their hands. Kate hasn't stopped bleeding since she gave birth, and this could be bad. Adeline walks up to Kate, who is lying on a makeshift bed with Merrily and Hannah beside her. Hannah is busy breastfeeding her boy, as she tells Adeline that this could all be natural, or it could be internal hemorrhaging. There is simply no way of telling. A saddened Adeline puts her hands on Kate's forehead and says, "Kate, honey, do you think you can muscle through? I have to know, Kate." Adeline is desperate because they are surrounded by the crossed right now. If they leave right now, they risk getting everyone killed. But Kate, being the strong woman that she is, doesn't even need to answer Adeline's question. She simply opens her eyes, looks up lovingly at Adeline and says, "Claire, her name is Claire, after my grandmother." Suddenly, Kate's baby girl wakes up and begins to cry in Merrily's arms. Hannah quickly unbuttons her shirt and begins feeding both the babies at once. Welp, that's it. The entire plan has now gone down the drain. Someone is bound to have heard the baby crying, and they need to leave this place fast. Adeline gathers Matthew and Jethro around her and tells them to go look in the eastern and western sewers. The two of them are supposed to make sure that nothing is coming after them, while Adeline goes and checks out the sewer in the north. She knows that it leads outside of the town, and they are going to use it for their escape. 5 minutes, and then we move, she says, as all of them quickly leave to carry out their given jobs. Armed with a revolver and renewed determination, Adeline walks into the northern sewer. When she turns a corner, she sees a crossed hanging into the sewer to take a poop. In a bid to do so, the crossed ends up dropping his axe in the sewer below. Thankfully, he does not jump in after it, and Adeline decides to take it for her own use. She carefully picks up the axe, careful not to alert the crossed, and then uses it to kill it. Simultaneously, on the other side of the sewer, in the western sewer, Jethro is cautiously making his way through the water, and suddenly he thinks he hears something. Jethro slowly turns around, only to be hit in the face by Joseph's head that is wielded by Joy. Jethro's nose, which was already broken, begins to bleed, and Joy pounces on him. She bites his lower lip and rips it right out. Blood sprays everywhere as Joy stands up and waits for Jethro to turn. Once he has turned, she unzips his pants, and the two have a go at it. Back at the dead end where only Merrily, Hannah and Kate remain, the three of them hear a growl coming from the sewer in front of them. Soon, what looks like a naked Jethro walks into view. Hannah tries to call out to him, and he simply says, "Hannah, help me. Hannah, I am hurt. They've got him. Go! Run!" screams Kate as she realizes that Jethro has been infected. With a loud shriek, Merrily fires off a shot at Jethro, but Kate grabs her gun and quickly turns it towards herself. She puts the barrel of the gun in her mouth as she tells Merrily, "I am sorry, sweetheart. I can't run." Merrily takes a second to realize what is happening, and then, with determination and a hint of goodbye on her face, she pulls the trigger. Hannah and Merrily have walked out of the sewer and are quickly joined by Adeline and Matthew, who are running towards them. Merrily is the last one to come out of the sewer, and she is trying to tell Adeline what happened to Kate. But Adeline is too fixated on what is behind her. She tries to warn Merrily, but it is already too late. Jethro and their mother Joy have ambushed them, and Jethro is holding Merrily up in the air by her hair. The kid is squirming in pain, but Joy and Jethro are too focused on enjoying this moment. By now, Joy has ditched the fat man's skin that she used to wear as a makeshift garb, and is completely naked. Jethro, on the other hand, is wearing Joseph's head on his crotch like makeshift underwear. "We're all together, children, just like old times. Time to initiate Merrily. You know how we love our family secrets." The same menacing, wicked and horrific smile spreads across joy in Jethro's face as she completes his intents. But this time, it is Matthew who jumps into action. Maybe he has seen enough, or maybe he just doesn't want Adeline to take responsibility this time as well. Either way, he raises his gun and shoots Jethro directly in the shoulder. This causes Jethro to drop merrily, and Matthew quickly jumps into action. Adeline provides cover fire, while Matthew leaps forward and grabs merrily from Jethro. Amidst all of this, Joy is desperately trying to kick and gnaw at Matthew, and that is when Jethro decides to create a distraction by showing them Joseph's head that he has been carrying on his crotch. Adeline's blood boils when she sees her deceased brother's head, and she instantly shoots Jethro directly in his right eye. Well, Jethro's eye explodes into a million places, along with his brain matter. The bits of flesh splatter everywhere, and Joy uses this chance to jump at Matthew. Hannah screams for Adeline to shoot at their mother, but Adeline is sadly out of bullets. Joy is now on top of Matthew, and she is about to bite into his left leg. Adeline has no choice but to use the axe. She quickly grabs it and raises it above her head using both of her hands, and then orders Matthew to lay back. As Adeline remembers this moment, she tells us, "It was a clean cut. Matthew took it. He yelled like a banshee, but he took it nonetheless." We then see what Adeline did. Adeline sliced off Matthew's left leg below the knee before their mother could bite into it. Adeline had no choice. If she had gone for her mother, Matthew would have ended up being infected. Adeline's mother is looking up at her and smiling still menacingly while holding Matthew's cut-off leg in her mouth. In a fit of rage, Adeline uses the axe to slice her mother's face in half. Mum never knew what hit her. I wonder if there was anything of our real mum left in that thing. I guess it doesn't matter. Mum wasn't much of a real mum anyways. Coldly, but determinedly, Adeline then tourniquets Matthew's cut-off leg using a rope. Adeline remembers ordering Matthew coldly to keep it together and to keep moving, no matter how hard it may seem. But as she remembers this moment, she tells us, "I don't know how, but he somehow kept it together. I was so proud of my brother, so proud of my entire family." We then see how Matthew managed to walk out of the sewer with his amputated leg. He is using the axe as a crutch while holding Adeline using his other arm, and that is how they survived. Matthew, Adeline, Hannah, Merrily, baby Adam, and baby Claire. We catch up with our survivors 8 days later. As usual, it is Adeline who tells us about everything that has happened since then. She tells us that after their little commotion, all of the crossed above started climbing down into the sewers to search for them, but this also resulted in a lot of chaos. And this chaos and the noise in the sewers helped them escape quickly. By the grace of a non-existent God, we made it out. By the same random grace, this subdivision we found was near entirely untouched. The survivors have managed to find a house in the suburbs that has not been ransacked by the crossed and is out in the middle of nowhere. It is filled with books, alts, bottled water and canned goods. It has been 8 days since we last saw any sign of the crossed. There were times when we could forget about the world, allow ourselves to be a family again. We see that the survivors' mental state and mood has improved drastically. Matthew and Hannah are taking care of Adam and Claire while playing the game of chess with Merrily. The house looks like a normal family home, the kind you would find around every corner before the crossed existed. An armed Adeline walks into the living room and tells Hannah and Matthew that she is going to look for some gas so that they can use the truck outside to escape in case something happens. Both of them nod, and as Adeline leaves, Matthew yells out, "When you get back, I expect a rematch at Uno Adeline." Adeline walks out of the house and the reality dawns upon her. She is surviving with 2 babies, a one-legged man, a woman, and barely a box of ammo. Things are far from good, because even if she manages to find some gas for the pickup truck, what is she going to do with it? She can't simply drive a few hundred miles and then hope to find some more gas out of the blue. Moreover, driving during these times is dangerous. Cars make noise, and noise draws the crossed, and most of the crossed hang around the roads anyways. She wears her usual cowboy hat, but her head hangs low as she tells us that she has given up her dream of building a ranch. That dream had died when her horses had died. She dreams of having horses now. If they had horses, even Matthew, the one-legged brother, could become a warrior. Things are kind of good now. Maybe it's time to end it all on our own terms. Sadly, Adeline is too lost in her thoughts and too distracted. Something whizzes past her, and she isn't able to look up in time to see what it was. She curses herself for being so naive and distracted distracted, and when she looks to her right, she yells out, "Oh my God!" But it is nothing bad, thankfully not this time. It's her 3 horses, the ones that had helped them escape by creating a distraction. They have managed to outrun the Crossed and have returned to her. Adeline rejoices as she realizes that she can now not only form a ranch, but effectively travel the land with her brother and sisters. Maybe there is someone rewarding and looking for people out there. Maybe she wasn't wrong to have held on to her faith all this while. The end. Marvelous verdict. So as you guys might know, we have been covering the Crossed comics since the first one, and this next storyline, Crossed Family Values, is written by David Lapham after Garth Ennis penned down the first one. Crossed Family Values has its own share of flaws and merits when you compare it to the first one. So let's take a look at the good things first. Firstly, the art is great. It is more defined and the violence is more graphic. The gore on each and every panel makes much more sense, and the sense of physics in the overall events is more believable. We have some decent people to root for, and even more bad people that we can hide. The extent to which the Crossed can torment and torture their victims has also been explored thoroughly, and taboo and sensitive subjects have only been used where absolutely necessary. But this is where the good ends and the bad begins. The biggest problem with Family Values is that it is not as nuanced as the first one. The first one was nuanced. It had more character growth, there were overarching character arcs, and everyone got their comeuppance at the end. The B-plots of the comic were more interesting, and how every character felt about what happened around them was more prominent. Family Values falls short in terms of that because the story entirely follows Adeline. There are no B-plots, and when it comes to character arcs, little growth is shown. In fact, the only truly lovable protagonist is Kate, but she too is used like a one-beat character that the writer can use to bounce off concepts. Her entire character is that she is a strong, determined, and centered woman, and that is all she is till the end of it. Hannah is a selfish, short-tempered, naive girl, and that is all she is by the end of it. You can see what the problem is here, and then we will briefly talk about the religious undertones and the heavy-handed symbolism throughout the entire comic. The comic seems to be a sermon on preserving one's faith in such scenarios, and that isn't a wrong thing, but the symbolism is too blatant. It tends to snap you out of the story as soon as you spot it, and once you spot it, you will keep on seeing it, especially if you're reading the comic on its own. And although we appreciated the new style of artwork in the starting, there are a few panels that are simply out of place. Like take this one for example. This is the panel from when Matthew and Adeline travelled back to New Paradise. Look at this drawing of Adeline. This is clearly a moustached cowboy riding his horse. This doesn't look like any at all. In fact, it gives the impression that this panel has been copy-pasted from a different project entirely. So the final verdict is that Family Values is a mixed bag. If you are a fan of The Crossed, then you will definitely want to check out this one. It has some great moments, some great events, and some ingenious ways to escape. But if you are someone that has just discovered this series and that could be covered by using the Crossed concept, then this one might be a bit boring for you.